The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop in front of the dusty depot, and Helena Zimmerman gripped her leather portfolio tighter, certain her precious charcoal drawings had been reduced to smudged ruins after 3 weeks of rattling across the American frontier. It was late September 1873, and Council Bluffs, Iowa stretched before her like a living sepia photograph, all wooden storefronts and dirt streets baking under an unforgiving sun. She stepped down from the coach, her traveling dress already coated with a fine layer of prairie dust, and took her first real breath of western air. It smelled of horses, leather, and something wild she could not quite name. Back in Philadelphia, her mother had wept for 3 days when Helena announced her intention to travel west and document the frontier through her art. Her father, more practical, had simply asked how she planned to survive. Helena had sold 6 paintings to a wealthy collector and used the money to fund this journey, determined to capture something real, something raw that the stuffy art galleries back east could never understand. The depot manager, a weathered man with more wrinkles than teeth, grabbed her trunk from the back of the coach. "First time out west, miss. Is it that obvious?" Helena brushed dust from her sleeves, a futile gesture. "You've got that look. Wide eyes, clean hands." He set her trunk down with a thud. "Though I expect both will change soon enough. You staying at the boarding house? That was my intention." Helena glanced around the bustling street. Cowboys ambled past, their spurs jingling with each step. Women in calico dresses carried baskets. A group of men stood outside what appeared to be a saloon, their laughter carrying across the distance. Everything moved with a different rhythm here, slower in some ways, more urgent in others. "Mrs. Patterson runs a decent place. 3 blocks that way, can't miss it. Yellow house with the green shutters." The manager tipped his hat and returned to his post, already calling out to the next arriving passenger. Helena secured her trunk's delivery to the boarding house and decided to walk through town with just her portfolio and carpetbag. The afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, the kind of light artists dreamed about. Her fingers itched for a pencil. She passed the general store, a blacksmith's forge where the ring of hammer on anvil created its own music, and a small church that looked like it had been built with more hope than lumber. The boarding house was exactly where the manager said it would be. Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a robust woman in her 50s with kind eyes and flour on her apron. "You must be Miss Zimmerman. Got your telegram last week. I've prepared the room at the end of the hall, gets the best morning light." "How did you know I needed good light?" Mrs. Patterson smiled. "You're carrying an artist's portfolio, dear. I've seen enough travelers to read the signs. Come in, come in. Supper's at 6. We've got 7 other boarders currently, all respectable folks. No drinking, no gambling, no entertaining men in your room. House rules." The room was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls, a narrow bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand, and best of all, a window that faced east. Helena set down her bags and moved to that window, looking out at the sprawling prairie beyond the town's edge. The grasslands rolled away toward the horizon, vast and golden and utterly unlike anything she had known in Philadelphia's cramped streets. She unpacked her drawing supplies with reverent care. Each pencil, each stick of charcoal, each precious tube of paint had survived the journey intact. Her sketchbook fell open to a drawing she had made of the Rocky Mountains from the stage-coach window, all jagged peaks and impossible grandeur. But she had not come west just to draw landscapes. She wanted to capture the people, the raw humanity of frontier life. That evening at supper, she met her fellow boarders. There was Mr. and Mrs. Chen, who ran a laundry service and spoke with soft accents. A young school teacher named Margaret who had traveled from Boston, two merchants who dealt in agricultural equipment, a minister recently assigned to the local church, and Mrs. Abernathy, a widow who had lived in Council Bluffs for 30 years and seemed to know everyone's business. An artist, Mrs. Abernathy declared when Helena explained her purpose. Well, we certainly have subjects worth painting. Though I expect you'll want to be careful where you point that pencil of yours. Some folks out here are superstitious about having their likeness captured. I always ask permission first, Helena assured her. Smart girl. Mrs. Abernathy helped herself to more potatoes. If you're looking for authentic Western subjects, you ought to visit the stockyards. The autumn cattle drives are starting to come through. Cowboys bringing herds from as far south as Texas, getting ready to ship east on the railroad. Margaret, the schoolteacher, leaned forward with interest. Is it safe? The stockyards, I mean. I have heard such stories about cowboys. Depends on the cowboy, Mrs. Abernathy said with a knowing look. Most are decent men doing hard work. But they've been on the trail for months, and when they get paid, some of them celebrate a little too enthusiastically, if you understand my meaning. Helena did understand, but she was not deterred. The next morning, after a breakfast of eggs and biscuits that put Philadelphia's finest restaurants to shame, she set out with her sketchbook tucked under her arm and a sense of purpose in her stride. The stockyards lay on the western edge of town, where the railroad tracks curved through like ribbons of steel. The noise hit her first. Hundreds of cattle lowing, men shouting, horses neighing. Then the smell, earthy and pungent and overwhelmingly animal. Helena had to pause for a moment, pressing a handkerchief to her nose until she adjusted. The scene before her was controlled chaos. Cattle filled enormous pens, their horns creating a forest of dangerous points. Cowboys on horseback moved among them with practiced ease, separating animals, checking brands, working with a coordination that looked almost like a dance. She found a spot near a fence post where she would be out of the way and opened her sketchbook. Her hand moved quickly, capturing the sweep of a lasso through the air, the muscular tension in a horse's neck, the weathered determination on a cattleman's face. She became so absorbed in her work that she did not notice someone approaching until a shadow fell across her page. That's mighty fine work, madam. Helena looked up and found herself staring at a man who might have been sculpted from the prairie itself. He stood well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and lean-hipped, wearing dusty canvas pants, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. But it was his face that caught her artist's eye. Strong jaw, straight nose, eyes the color of storm clouds under dark brows. Lines around those eyes spoke of years spent squinting into sun and wind. He was perhaps 27 or 28, though the outdoor life made exact age hard to judge. "Thank you," Helena said, suddenly aware of how she must look, a city woman in a traveling dress completely out of place among working cowboys. "You're drawing the cattle drive." He tilted his head to see her sketchbook better. His movements were economical, no wasted motion. "May I?" She hesitated only a moment before turning the sketchbook so he could see properly. His eyes moved across the page with unexpected focus, taking in each detail. Most men she knew back east had barely glanced at her work before offering empty compliments. This man actually looked. "You got Pete's crooked nose right," he said, pointing to one of the figures. "And that's definitely Ace's mare. See that marking on her foreleg? You caught that perfect. You know the men I drew? Work with them. We brought 1,500 head up from Kansas. Took us near about 2 months." He extended his hand. "Zachary Iverson. Most people just call me Zach." Helena shook his hand, noting the calluses, the rope burns, the strength in his grip that was carefully moderated. Helena Zimmerman. I am an artist from Philadelphia, long way from home. That is rather the point. I wanted to document the West, the real West, not the romanticized version people back east imagine. She found herself speaking more than she usually did with strangers. Something about his quiet attention made conversation easy. Zach settled against the fence post, pushing his hat back slightly. And what do folks back east imagine? Savages and shootouts, mostly. Lawless violence at every turn, or alternately, noble heroes taming a savage land. I suspect the truth is somewhere in between and far more interesting. A slight smile touched his lips. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges. You'd be right about that. Mostly the West is just hard work and long days. The exciting stuff makes for good stories but bad living. A shout went up from the pens. Zach's attention snapped in that direction immediately, his whole body going alert. "Excuse me, madam. We've got a situation." He vaulted over the fence with startling grace and moved toward a commotion in one of the pens. Helena could see a massive longhorn had gotten agitated, its horns sweeping dangerously close to the other cattle. The animal's eyes rolled white with fear or rage. She could not tell which. Zach approached from the side, speaking in a low, steady voice she could not make out from this distance. The other cowboys gave him room, clearly trusting his judgment. Helena's hand moved across the page, capturing the scene. The dangerous curve of those horns. The tension in every line of Zach's body as he eased closer to the agitated animal, the dust rising around them like smoke. She had never drawn anything so immediate, so alive. Her pencil flew, trying to catch each moment before it passed. Zach kept talking to the longhorn, his movements slow and deliberate. He was close enough now that one wrong move would put him directly in the path of those wicked horns. Helena held her breath. Then Zach reached out and touched the animal's shoulder, just a light contact, still talking in that calm, low voice. The longhorn's head lowered slightly. Its wild eyes began to settle. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, the animal calmed, and Zach was able to guide it into a separate pen without incident. The other cowboys clapped him on the back when he returned, clearly pleased with his handling of the situation. Zach accepted their praise with a modest nod and then made his way back to where Helena stood. "That was remarkable," she said. "How did you know what to do?" "Spent my whole life around cattle. You learn to read them, understand what they're feeling. That old bull was just scared, not mean. Got separated from his usual herd mates and panicked." Zach wiped sweat from his forehead. "Sorry about that interruption. Please do not apologize. That was exactly what I came to see." Helena showed him the drawing she had made, though I am not sure I captured the reality of it. Zach studied the sketches with that same focused attention. "Looks pretty real to me. You got the fear in his eyes. And there, see, that's exactly how I was standing. You even got my worn-out boot heels." He glanced at her with something like respect. "You really do see things, don't you?" Helena felt warmth rise to her cheeks. "I try. An artist's job is to observe, to find the truth in a scene." "What brought you to Council Bluffs specifically? There's more dramatic scenery further west, mountains, canyons, all that." "I wanted to see where the east meets the west. This town sits right on that boundary. The railroad brings eastern civilization, but beyond those tracks is still frontier. I thought it would be interesting to document that intersection." She closed her sketchbook. "And I confess, I did not want to travel too far alone. A woman has to be practical." "Sensible." Zach's expression grew thoughtful. "If you want to document the cattle drives, you're welcome to come back tomorrow. We'll be here another 3 days at least, getting the herd ready for rail shipment." "Pete, the fellow with the crooked nose you drew, He's got some good stories if you can get him talking. Been on the trail 20 years. I would like that very much. Thank you. No thanks necessary. It's nice to have someone interested in the work who isn't just complaining about the smell. That small smile appeared again. A bell rang somewhere in town, marking midday. Helena realized she had been at the stockyards for nearly 4 hours. I should get back to the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson serves lunch promptly at noon. Don't want to make you late. Will you be back tomorrow? If I am welcome, yes. You're welcome. Zack tipped his hat. Safe walk back, Miss Zimmerman. Helena, please. If I am going to be drawing you and your colleagues, we need not stand on such formality. Helena, then, and I'm Zack. She walked back to the boarding house with her mind full of images. The way Zack had moved, controlled and confident. The dramatic scene with the longhorn. The whole vibrant chaos of the stockyards. She could hardly wait to start translating her rough sketches into finished drawings. Over lunch, Mrs. Abernathy quizzed her about the morning. Did you find subjects worth your artistic attention? I did. The cowboys were kind enough to let me observe their work. Any cowboys in particular catch your eye? Mrs. Abernathy asked with a sly look. Margaret giggled behind her napkin. Helena felt her cheeks warm again. I met a man named Zachary Iverson. He seemed knowledgeable about cattle. Zack Iverson. Mrs. Patterson set down a bowl of stew. I know his mother, good family. They have a ranch about 15 miles north of here. Zack usually works the autumn cattle drives to earn extra money, then goes home to help with the family spread through winter. He was very polite, Helena said, focusing on her meal. And handsome, Mrs. Abernathy prompted. I noticed his face would make an excellent subject for a character study. Helena tried to sound professional, but the other women laughed good-naturedly. Oh, to be young again, Mrs. Abernathy sighed. In my day, a handsome cowboy was reason enough to extend a stay out west. Helena returned to the stockyards the next morning and found the atmosphere somewhat calmer. The cattle had settled after a night's rest, and the cowboys were working on the tedious business of checking each animal, documenting brands, and organizing the shipment schedules. Zack spotted her arrival and waved her over to where he stood with a group of men. Fellas, this is Helena. She's an artist from Philadelphia documenting frontier life. Helena, this is Pete, Ace, Dutch, and Slim. The men nodded politely. Pete, whose crooked nose Helena had indeed captured accurately, pulled off his hat. Madam, Zack says you draw real good. I try my best. Would you gentlemen mind if I sketched while you work? I promise not to get in the way. Sketch away, Ace said. He was younger than the others, probably close to Helena's own 23 years. Just make me look handsome. I draw what I see, Helena replied with a smile. The men laughed and returned to their work. Helena found her spot from yesterday and settled in, opening to a fresh page. Today she focused on individual portraits, trying to capture the character in each weathered face. Pete's eyes crinkled with decades of laughter lines. Dutch had a scar along his jaw that suggested a violent past he likely preferred not to discuss. Slim was ironically the biggest of them all, built like a bull with hands that could probably bend horseshoes. Zack worked among them but somehow stood apart. He had a natural authority the others responded to, though he wore no badge of leadership. When a question arose about which pen to put a particular cow in, they asked Zack. When a gate mechanism stuck, they called for Zack. He handled each issue with calm competence, never raising his voice, never rushing. Around mid-morning, he brought her a canteen of water. Gets hot out here. You should drink. Helena accepted gratefully. She had been so absorbed in her work that she had not noticed her parched throat. Thank you. You always take care of everyone like this. Just seems natural. My ma raised me and my 2 brothers to be helpful. He leaned against the fence beside her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What made you want to be an artist? I mean, from what I understand, it's not exactly a common profession for a woman." Helena considered her answer. Most people ask this with judgment in their voices, but Zach sounded genuinely curious. "I have always seen the world in pictures. Even as a child, I would look at something and want to capture it, preserve it somehow. My father indulged me with drawing lessons. He thought it was a harmless hobby for a girl, but the more I learned, the more I realized it was not a hobby for me. It was necessary, like breathing. And your family supports you traveling out here alone. Support is a strong word. They tolerate it because I am of age and funded the trip myself. They expect me to return in a few months, marry the banker's son they have picked out, and hang up my pencils for good." She heard the bitterness in her own voice and tried to soften it. "What about you? Have you always been a cowboy?" "Born to it. My father started the ranch back in '58, right after the Pikes Peak gold rush fizzled out for him. Figured cattle were more reliable than gold, and he was right. We run about 300 head normally. I hire out for the big drives in autumn because I like the trail work. Something about those long days under open sky, it settles a man's soul." "Do you ever want to do something else?" Zach thought about that. "Sometimes I think about having my own spread, something bigger than what my family runs, but mostly I'm content. The work is good, the land is beautiful, and I don't have to answer to anyone but the cattle and the weather." He met her eyes. "I expect that sounds simple to someone like you, someone educated and artistic." "It sounds honest," Helena said. "There is beauty in knowing exactly who you are and being content with it. Most people I know back east are miserable, striving for something they cannot even name." A comfortable silence fell between them. Helena returned to her sketching, and Zach watched for a moment before returning to work. But something had shifted. She found herself more aware of where he was in the stockyards, tracking his movements even when she was ostensibly drawing someone else. Over the next few days, a pattern developed. Helena would arrive at the stockyards each morning, and Zach would make sure she had water, shade when the sun grew too intense, and protection from any of the rowdier cowboys who might bother her. In return, she showed him her drawings, explaining her artistic choices, why she emphasized certain lines or shadows. He listened with an attention that made her feel truly seen, perhaps for the first time in her life. On the third day, Pete shared stories of cattle drives through Indian territory, of stampedes and river crossings and narrow escapes from rustlers. Helena sketched while he talked, capturing not just his face but somehow the essence of his tales in the lines and shadows. When she showed him the finished portrait, the old cowboy's eyes grew misty. "That's really how you see me, not just some worn-out saddle bum. I see a man who has lived a remarkable life and has the face to prove it," Helena said. Pete carefully took the drawing. "Could I keep this?" "I'd like to send it to my daughter back in Missouri. She hasn't seen me in 5 years." Helena felt a lump in her throat. "Of course, it is yours." Word spread among the cowboys that the lady artist would draw portraits for free. Soon Helena had a line of rough men asking shyly if she might have time to capture their likeness for a sweetheart or mother or child back home. She drew until her fingers cramped, until the light began to fail, and loved every minute of it. These faces, these stories, this was exactly what she had traveled west to find. Zach waited until the others had wandered off to their evening meals before approaching with his own request. "Would you draw me? I have already sketched you several times." Helena flipped back through her pages, showing him half a dozen studies. "I know. But those are you drawing me as part of the work, part of the scenery. I meant, would you draw me the way you drew Pete? Like I'm a person, not just a subject." There was something vulnerable in the question that caught at Helena's heart. She understood suddenly that these men, for all their rough exteriors and hard work, wanted to be seen as individuals, as people with value beyond their labor. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to a wooden crate. "The light is perfect right now." Zach settled onto the crate, unsure what to do with his hands. Helena positioned him slightly to the side, so the evening light caught the planes of his face just right. Then she began to draw, really looking at him in a way she had not quite let herself do before. Strong bones, weathered skin, eyes that held depth she wanted to explore. The set of his shoulders spoke of responsibility carried without complaint. His hands, resting on his knees, were scarred from rope and weather but somehow still gentle. She tried to capture all of it, the strength and the kindness, the confidence and the hidden uncertainty. The stockyard grew quiet around them. The other cowboys had gone. The cattle settled into evening rest. It was just Helena and Zach and the fading golden light, and she had never felt more focused in her entire life. This was not just a drawing. This was her trying to understand something fundamental about this man who had been so kind to her, who looked at her art with respect, who treated her like an equal in this male-dominated world. When she finally stopped, her hand aching, full darkness had nearly fallen. Zach stood stiffly, muscles protesting the long stillness. "Can I see?" Helena hesitated. The drawing felt almost too personal to share, but she had promised, so she turned the sketchbook around. Zach stared at his own image for a long moment. His expression was unreadable in the dim light. "Is that really what you see when you look at me?" "Yes." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "You made me look noble, like I'm someone important. You are important." Helena closed the sketchbook, holding it against her chest. "Every person is important." "That is what I am trying to show with these drawings, the inherent dignity in ordinary lives." Zach stepped closer. They were standing very near each other now, close enough that Helena could smell leather and sage and something uniquely him. "You see more than most people, Helena Zimmerman." "You let me see more than most people show, Zachary Iverson." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Zach cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should walk you back to the boarding house. It's not safe for a lady alone after dark." "That is not necessary." "I know. But I'd like to anyway, if you'll let me." They walked through the darkening streets of Council Bluffs, not touching but acutely aware of each other. Helena had never felt quite like this before. The men who had courted her back in Philadelphia had been pale imitations of masculinity compared to Zach's quiet strength. And none of them had ever looked at her the way Zach did, like she was remarkable, like her art mattered, like she was someone worth knowing. At the boarding house steps, Zach paused. "We're shipping out the day after tomorrow. The cattle are loaded and the job's done. I'll be heading back to my family's ranch." Helena felt her heart sink. "Oh, of course, I should have realized. But Council Bluffs isn't far. 15 miles. If you're staying in town a while longer, I could visit. Maybe show you some other aspects of frontier life worth drawing. The ranch, the prairie, things like that." He looked uncertain, almost boyish. "If you'd be interested." "I would be very interested." His smile blazed like sunrise. "Then I'll come by in a few days, once I've checked in with my family and taken care of the necessary work. Would Sunday afternoon suit you?" "Sunday would be perfect." Zach tipped his hat. "Good night, Helena." "Good night, Zach." She watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the shadows, and felt like the world had tilted slightly on its axis. She had come west to find subjects for her art, to document a disappearing way of life. She had not expected to find someone who looked at her like she was the art, someone who made her pulse quicken and her thoughts scatter. Inside the boarding house, Mrs. Abernathy took one look at Helena's face and smiled knowingly. The cowboy. His name is Zach. And he walks you home in the dark. How gentlemanly. He is gentlemanly and kind and interesting. Helena set down her portfolio. He is coming to visit on Sunday. Well then, Mrs. Patterson said from the parlor, we had better make sure you have a nice dress pressed for Sunday. The next few days passed in a strange suspension. Helena continued sketching around town, documenting the general store, the blacksmith, the small church, the faces of settlers and travelers. But her mind kept drifting to Zach, wondering what he was doing, whether he was thinking of her as often as she thought of him. Sunday arrived bright and clear. Helena changed her dress 3 times before settling on a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes. Mrs. Patterson had helped her arrange her dark hair in a softer style than her usual practical bun. Margaret loaned her a cameo brooch. Even Mr. Chen commented approvingly when she came downstairs. Zach arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, riding a beautiful bay mare and leading a gentle-looking sorrel. He had clearly made an effort, too. His clothes were clean, his hair freshly trimmed, his boots polished. When he saw Helena on the porch, his face lit up in a way that made her breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You look quite handsome yourself. I brought Emma for you to ride. She's the sweetest horse we've got, perfect manners." He helped Helena mount, his hands steady at her waist, and she was grateful for the side saddle that hid how her legs trembled at his touch. They rode out of town, heading north into the rolling prairie. The September afternoon was perfect, warm but not hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of grass and wildflowers. Zach rode beside her, pointing out landmarks, sharing stories about the land. "That creek there, it floods every spring, turns into a raging river. But come summer, it's barely a trickle. The land out here is full of contradictions like that, beautiful and harsh, generous and stingy all at once." "That is what makes it fascinating," Helena said. "Nothing is simple here. Everything has layers." They rode for an hour, conversation flowing easily between them. Zach told her about his family, his parents who had built their ranch from nothing, his 2 younger brothers who helped run it. His mother kept chickens and a massive garden. His father, in his 60s now, had a bad leg from an old injury, but still insisted on doing a full day's work. Helena talked about Philadelphia, about her frustration with society's expectations for women, about her determination to make art that mattered. Zach listened without judgment, asking questions that showed he was really thinking about what she said. "Do you ever get lonely?" he asked. "Being different from what people expect." "Every day," Helena admitted, "but I would be lonelier if I tried to be someone I am not. What about you?" "Do you ever feel lonely out here?" "Sometimes. The work is solitary often, long hours with just cattle and sky for company. I've got family, got friends, but there's a difference between having people around and having someone who really understands you." He glanced at her. "I've felt less lonely these past few days with you than I have in years." Helena's heart hammered. "I feel the same way." They crested a hill and Zach pulled his horse to a stop. "There, that's home." Below them lay a valley with a small ranch, a sturdy house, a barn, corrals, outbuildings. Cattle dotted the grassland beyond. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting someone was preparing the evening meal. It looked like a painting, pastoral and peaceful. "It is beautiful," Helena said. "Would you like to meet my family? My mother would be thrilled. She's been after me for years to find a good woman." The casual way he said it, the implicit suggestion that Helena might be that good woman, made her blush. But she nodded. "I would like that very much." The Iverson family welcomed Helena with overwhelming warmth. Zach's mother, Judith, was a sturdy woman with graying blonde hair and her son's kind eyes. She immediately pulled Helena into the house, insisting she must be tired and thirsty after the ride. Zach's father, Thomas, had weathered features and a firm handshake despite his limp. The two younger brothers, Matthew and Samuel, were both in their early 20s, clearly curious about the woman their eldest brother had brought home. Over dinner of roast chicken, potatoes, and vegetables from Judith's garden, the family peppered Helena with questions about Philadelphia, her art, her impressions of the West. She found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn into their easy camaraderie. "Zach says you're a real talented artist," Judith said. "I'd love to see your work sometime. I brought my sketchbook." Helena retrieved it from where she had tucked it carefully in her saddle bag. She opened it to show the family her drawings of the stockyards, the portraits of the cowboys, the landscapes of the prairie. They passed the sketchbook around with reverent care, exclaiming over each page. When they reached the portrait of Zach, Judith grew very quiet. "This is how you see my son." "Yes, madam. You see him truly then, see the good man he is." Judith handed the sketchbook back with suspiciously bright eyes. "Would you consider drawing our family, all together? I've wanted a portrait for years, but we've never had anyone with the skill." "I would be honored." They arranged themselves on the porch, the evening light soft and golden. Helena worked quickly, trying to capture not just their faces but their relationships to each other. The way Thomas's hand rested on Judith's shoulder. How the brothers jostled good-naturedly for position. The quiet pride in all their expressions. And Zach, standing slightly to the side, looking not at Helena but at his family with such love that it made her chest ache. When she finished, the family gathered around to see. Judith wiped away tears. "It is perfect, absolutely perfect, thank you." "Please, let me pay you," Thomas said. "No payment necessary. You welcomed me into your home. This is my thank you." As the sun began to set, Zach walked Helena back to where the horses were tied. His family had insisted she must come back soon, that she was welcome any time. Helena felt almost dizzy with how accepted she had been, how easily she had fit into their warm circle. "Your family is wonderful," she said. "They liked you. I can tell." Zach helped her mount Emma, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Helena, I want to be honest with you. I've never felt this way about anyone before. These past few days, getting to know you, it's like I've been waiting my whole life without knowing what I was waiting for." Helena's breath caught. "Zach, I feel the same way, but I do not know what to do about it. My life is in Philadelphia. I am only here for a few more weeks at most, and you are here with your family, your ranch, your responsibilities. I know. I've been thinking about that too." He looked up at her, his eyes serious. "But maybe we don't have to figure everything out right now. Maybe we can just see where this goes. Spend time together while you're here. Get to know each other better. The future will sort itself out. Is it fair to start something when we do not know if it can continue? Is it fair to walk away from something this rare without giving it a chance?" He covered her hand where it rested on the pommel. "I'm not asking for promises, Helena. I'm just asking for time, whatever time we can have." Helena looked down at him, this good man with calloused hands and a gentle heart, and felt something inside her shift and settle like a puzzle piece finding its place. "All right, whatever time we can have." Zach's smile could have lit the prairie. He mounted his own horse, and they rode back toward Council Bluffs through the deepening dusk. The sky was a masterpiece of oranges and purples, the kind of sunset that reminded Helena why she loved art, why she needed to capture beauty wherever she found it. They paused at the top of the last hill overlooking town. Zach dismounted and helped Helena down. For a moment they stood close together, the horses grazing nearby, the world reduced to just the two of them and the fading light. "Helena," Zach said softly, "may I kiss you?" She had been kissed before, fumbling attempts by eager suitors back east, but somehow she knew this would be different. Yes. He cupped her face in his hands, gentle despite their rough calluses, and lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, questioning. Then Helena leaned into him, and it deepened, becoming something more urgent, more necessary. She felt his arms come around her, pulling her close, and she wrapped her own arms around his neck, rising on her toes to meet him better. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "Lord have mercy, woman, you are going to be the death of me." Helena laughed breathlessly. "I could say the same about you, Cowboy." They remounted and rode into town, not speaking but connected by something deeper than words. At the boarding house, Zach helped her down one more time. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes, always yes." He kissed her once more, quickly, then rode away into the night. Helena stood on the porch for a long moment, pressing her fingers to her lips, feeling like she had been struck by lightning. Inside, Mrs. Abernathy took one look at her and cackled. "Oh, you've got it bad, girl." "I do," Helena agreed, unable to stop smiling. "I really do." The following weeks passed in a golden haze. Zach came to town as often as his ranch work allowed, sometimes for a full day, sometimes just for a few stolen hours. They walked along the creek, had picnics in the prairie, attended a church social where Zach proudly introduced Helena to half the county. She met his friends, his neighbors, and slowly began to understand the tight-knit community that existed out here. She continued her art, now drawing not just scenes but memories. Zach's profile against a sunset, his hands braiding rope, the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching. Her sketchbook filled with images of him, of this unexpected love blooming in the most unlikely place. One afternoon in late October, they sat by the creek on a blanket Judith had loaned them. The air had grown cooler, autumn asserting itself. Leaves from the cottonwood trees drifted down around them in shades of gold. "I have been thinking," Zach said, skipping a stone across the water. "About us. About what happens when you have to go back east." Helena's stomach tightened. They had been avoiding this conversation, living in the present, pretending the future did not exist. "I have been thinking about it too. I could come with you to Philadelphia, find work there." He said it without looking at her, still focused on the creek. "No." The word came out more forcefully than she intended. "Zach, you would wither away in a city. You belong here under these big skies doing work you love. I could never ask you to give that up." "Then stay. Stay here with me." Helena felt tears prick her eyes. "And do what? Abandon my art career before it has even begun. I have worked so hard, sacrificed so much to be taken seriously as an artist. You could still be an artist here. Look at all the drawings you have made. It is not the same. I need to be in Philadelphia to sell my work, to build my reputation. The West is fascinating, but the art world is back east." She turned to face him. "Would you understand if I said that I need both? Need you and need my art?" "I understand need," Zach said quietly. "And I understand that sometimes wanting something is not enough." He finally met her eyes. "I love you, Helena. I know we haven't known each other long, but I love you. And if loving you means letting you go, then that is what I'll do. I love you too." The words were barely a whisper. "That is why this is so hard." They held each other by the creek, the water flowing past indifferent to human heartbreak, and Helena felt like she was being torn in two. How could she choose between the life she had always planned and the love she had never expected to find? That evening she sat in her room at the boarding house, surrounded by months of drawings. The faces of cowboys, the sweep of the prairie, the stockyards, the church, the people she had met. And throughout it all, appearing again and again, was Zach. Zach working. Zach laughing. Zach looking at her with those storm-gray eyes full of love. A knock at her door interrupted her spiral of thoughts. "Come in." Mrs. Patterson entered carrying a tea tray. "Thought you might need this. You looked troubled at supper." "Thank you." Helena accepted the cup gratefully. Mrs. Patterson sat on the edge of the bed, an unusual familiarity but somehow welcome. "I've lived a long time, dear. Seen a lot of people come and go through this boarding house. Can I offer some unsolicited advice, please? The thing about life is it never goes quite how we plan. We make our careful arrangements, build our neat little futures in our minds, and then something comes along and knocks it all sideways. Could be tragedy, could be opportunity, could be love. The people who are happiest are the ones who can adapt, who can reimagine their future when circumstances change." "You think I should stay here," Helena said. "I think you should ask yourself what you really want, not what you think you should want. There is a difference." Mrs. Patterson patted her hand. "That young man looks at you like you hung the moon, and you light up like a firefly when he walks in a room. That kind of connection does not come along often, but neither does genuine talent and ambition. Only you can decide which matters more." After Mrs. Patterson left, Helena stared at her drawings for a long time. She picked up the portrait of Zach, the one she had drawn that evening at the stockyards when she first began to realize what he was coming to mean to her. She had captured something essential about him, some quality that made him unique, irreplaceable, and suddenly she understood. The art mattered. The ambition mattered. But this man, this good, honest, kind man who saw her for who she truly was, he mattered more. Not because she was giving up her dreams, but because being with him was part of her dream. She could adapt. She could find a way to be an artist here in the West. It would be different than she had planned, but different did not mean lesser. She had spent so long focused on what she was supposed to want that she had almost missed what she actually needed. And what she needed was Zach. The next morning, Helena rode out to the Iverson ranch alone. Judith answered her knock, surprise and pleasure mingling on her face. "Helena, what a lovely surprise. Come in, come in. Zach is out mending fence, but he should be back soon. Actually, I was hoping to speak with you first, if you have a moment." Intrigued, Judith led her to the kitchen and poured coffee. "What's on your mind, dear?" Helena took a breath, gathering her courage. "I love your son, and I want to stay here, build a life with him if he will have me, but I need to know if I can still pursue my art. I cannot be happy as just a rancher's wife. I need to draw, to paint, to create. It is as necessary to me as breathing." Judith studied her for a long moment. "Does Zach know you're willing to stay?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure I could make it work before I told him. I will not give him hope just to take it away." "Smart girl." Judith sipped her coffee. "The nearest town with a proper art supply store is Omaha, about 60 miles south. There is a train connection, so you could go when needed. As for selling your work, there is a gallery in Omaha and another in Cheyenne. Not Philadelphia, certainly, but respectable. You could also sell through the mail. Several businesses out here operate that way. What about teaching? Could I teach art? The school in town would probably love to have someone with your training, and I expect private students would come from miles around. Folks out here are starved for culture, for beauty. You could fill a real need." Judith reached across the table to squeeze Helena's hand. "You could have a good life here, different than you imagined, but good, and you would make my son happier than I have ever seen him." Zach arrived home an hour later, dusty and tired from fence work. He stopped dead when he saw Helena sitting on the porch with his mother. "Helena, is everything all right?" She stood, her heart pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "I need to talk to you. Alone." Worry creased his brow, but he nodded. They walked away from the house toward the barn. Inside, the familiar smells of hay and leather and horses surrounded them. Dust motes danced in shafts of light from the high windows. "You're leaving," Zach said flatly. You've come to say goodbye. No. The opposite. Helena moved closer to him. I've come to say I want to stay if you still want me to. He stared at her. What about Philadelphia, your art career? I have realized something. I came west looking for subjects to draw for inspiration. I found all that, but I found something more important. I found you. She took his hands in hers. Zach, you are the masterpiece I have been seeking my whole life. Not a subject to draw, but a person to know, to love, to build a life with. Everything else I can adapt. But this, I cannot walk away from this. Are you certain? I don't want you resenting me in 5 years, wishing you had chosen differently. I am certain. I can still be an artist here. Teach, sell my work through other channels, keep creating. It will be different than I planned, but different can be wonderful. She smiled up at him through tears. You told me the people who are happiest are the ones who can adapt. I can adapt. I want to adapt, for you, for us. Zach pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I love you. God, Helena, I love you so much. I love you too. So very much. He kissed her then, long and deep, pouring all his relief and joy and love into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and laughing simultaneously. Marry me, Zach said. I know it's fast, I know we should probably wait, but I don't want to wait. I want to start our life together right now. Yes, absolutely yes. They told his family that evening. Judith cried happy tears and immediately began planning the wedding. Thomas shook Zach's hand and welcomed Helena officially to the family. The younger brothers teased Zach mercilessly about being so smitten so quickly, but their joy was genuine. Helena wrote to her parents that night, a long letter explaining her decision. She expected disappointment, even anger. Their response, when it came 3 weeks later, surprised her. Her mother wrote that while she worried for Helena's welfare, she recognized her daughter's happiness in every word of her letter. Her father, ever practical, sent a check as a wedding gift and instructions for Helena to invest it wisely. They would not be able to travel west for the wedding, but they sent their blessing. The wedding took place in late November, just before winter set in. The small church in Council Bluffs was packed with Zach's family, friends, neighbors, and the cowboys Helena had drawn, who had made a special trip to attend. Margaret stood as her bridesmaid, wearing a new dress she had sewn for the occasion. Matthew served as Zach's best man. Helena wore a simple white dress that Judith had helped her sew, with lace from one of the general store's finest bolts of fabric. She carried wildflowers that Zach had ridden miles to find, the last hardy blooms before winter killed them off. When she walked down the aisle and saw Zach waiting for her, looking overwhelmed and love struck in his Sunday best, she knew she had made the right choice. The vows were traditional, the ceremony brief. But when Zach slipped a simple gold band on her finger and promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life, Helena felt the words settle into her bones as truth. This was real. This was forever. The reception at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was lively. Someone played a fiddle. People danced in the parlor, the furniture pushed back to make room. There was food and laughter and so much warmth that Helena felt embraced by this community that had welcomed her as one of their own. Late in the evening, as the party wound down, Zach pulled her aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Iverson, Mrs. Iverson, her new name, her new life. More than ready." They had a small house on the Iverson property, one that Thomas and Matthew had helped Zach build in the weeks leading up to the wedding. It was simple, just 3 rooms, but the north-facing room had huge windows perfect for an artist's studio. Zach had built her a drawing table, commissioned from the town carpenter. Judith had sewn curtains. It was perfect. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, full of whispered words and gentle discoveries. Afterward, lying in Zach's arms in their new bed, Helena felt a peace she had never known. "No regrets?" Zach asked softly, stroking her hair. "Not a single one. I'll do everything I can to make sure you never have any. I promise you'll be able to keep making your art, keep being the person you're meant to be. I know. That is why I love you." Winter came to the prairie with snow and bitter cold. Helena learned the rhythms of ranch life. The early mornings feeding stock, the constant maintenance work, the long evenings by the fire when outdoor work was impossible. She helped Judith with cooking and sewing, learning practical skills her Philadelphia upbringing had never required. But she also painted. The studio Zach had created became her sanctuary. She worked on a series of paintings documenting frontier life, large pieces that captured the drama and beauty of the West. When spring came, Zach helped her crate them carefully and ship them to galleries in Omaha and Cheyenne. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Gallery owners wrote praising her authentic vision, the way she captured both the hardship and the dignity of Western life. People wanted to buy her work. Suddenly, Helena had commissions, requests for specific pieces, interest from collectors. "You did it," Zach said, reading one particularly glowing letter. "You found a way to have your art career out here." "We did it," Helena corrected. "You made it possible." The school in Council Bluffs hired her to teach art 2 days a week. She rode into town on Emma, the gentle mare Zach had given her as a wedding gift, her supplies packed in saddle bags. The children were eager students, hungry for her instruction. She taught them to see the beauty in ordinary things, to look closely at the world around them. Private students followed. Ranchers' wives who had always wanted to learn to draw, young people with natural talent who needed guidance. Helena's reputation grew. She was no longer just the lady artist from Philadelphia. She was Mrs. Iverson, a respected member of the community, someone people turned to for art lessons, for advice, for friendship. In the summer of 1874, Helena's first child was born. A boy they named Daniel, after Zach's grandfather. He had his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. Zach was a devoted father, patient and gentle, often walking the floor with Daniel at night so Helena could sleep. "You're going to spoil him," Helena teased, watching Zach rock their son. "That's a father's prerogative," Zach replied, not looking up from Daniel's tiny face. Helena painted her son, dozens of studies capturing his growth and changes. She painted Zach holding him, the strong cowboy cradling the tiny baby with such tenderness it made her cry. She painted the ranch, the prairie, the endless sky. Her work evolved, deepened, became richer with her happiness. Letters arrived regularly from Philadelphia. Her former teacher wrote expressing amazement at her success. Friends who had doubted her decision admitted she seemed to have found her place. The banker's son she was supposed to have married wrote a stiff note congratulating her on her marriage and informing her he had wed someone else. Helena laughed reading it, unable to imagine the pale life she would have led with him. When Daniel was 2, a daughter arrived. Elizabeth, named for Helena's mother. She had Zach's blonde hair and Helena's artistic eye, always studying things with intense focus. 2 years after that came another son, William. The small house grew crowded, so Zach and his brothers built an addition, more rooms for their growing family. Helena's parents finally visited in the summer of 1878, making the long journey west to meet their grandchildren. Helena worried they would judge her life, find it lacking. Instead, her mother wept seeing how happy she was. Her father spent hours talking with Zach about the ranch, clearly impressed by his son-in-law's knowledge and work ethic. "You chose well," her father told Helena before they left. "He is a good man, And you, daughter, you are thriving in a way you never did in Philadelphia. We were wrong to doubt you. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons. Harsh winters, glorious springs, hot summers, golden autumns. The children grew. Daniel showed his father's natural way with animals. Elizabeth had her mother's artistic talent, constantly drawing and painting. William was the adventurer, always exploring, getting into gentle trouble. Helena's career continued to flourish. Her paintings sold well. She published a book of Western sketches that received favorable reviews. She taught countless students. But her greatest joy was her family, the life she and Zach had built together. On their 10th anniversary, Zach surprised her with a trip to Omaha. They stayed in a fine hotel, attended the theater, visited art galleries. It was wonderful, sophisticated, cultured. But after 3 days, Helena found herself homesick for the prairie, for their ranch, for the wide open spaces that had become home. "Can we go back?" she asked. Zach grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that. I miss the kids, and frankly, I miss being able to see the horizon." The train carried them back north, and when they finally rode up to their house, the children ran out to greet them with shrieks of joy. Judith, who had been watching them, smiled indulgently. "They've been good as gold, but they missed you terribly." That evening, after the children were in bed, Helena and Zach sat on their porch watching the sunset. The sky was ablaze with color, the prairie rolling away golden in the fading light. "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if you had gone back to Philadelphia?" Zach asked. Helena considered the question. "Sometimes, but only in an abstract way, like wondering about a story I decided not to read. This is my real life, the one that matters. I regret nothing." "Even when William tracked mud through your studio last week," Helena laughed. "Even then?" "Well, maybe a small regret about the mud." Zach took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "I tell you at least once a day that I love you, but I don't know if you understand how much. You gave up so much to be here with me. I gave up one dream for a better one." "There is no sacrifice in that." Helena squeezed his hand. "You are still the masterpiece I was seeking, Zach Iverson. Every single day you are still the masterpiece." He kissed her softly, a kiss flavored with a decade of love and partnership and shared life. The sunset blazed on, painting the world in impossible colors, and Helena thought about how she had traveled west looking for something to capture with her art, and had instead found something that captured her heart. The prairie wind carried the scent of grass and earth and home. In the distance, cattle lowed. A coyote sang its evening song. The first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Helena rested her head on Zach's shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart. This was the West she had sought. Not just the dramatic landscapes or the rough cowboys or the frontier adventure, but this, a good man and a growing family and work that fulfilled her and a community that accepted her. A life built with love and sweat and determination. A life that was hers, truly and completely hers. Daniel appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Papa, Mama, I had a bad dream." Zach scooped up their oldest son, settling him on his lap. "Tell us about it, partner." As Daniel described his nightmare, Helena watched her husband soothe their child with patient words and gentle reassurance. She thought about the drawing she had made of him that first week they met, how she had tried to capture his essential character on paper. She had succeeded, but what she had not known then was how much more there was to discover. 10 years later, she was still learning new things about this man, still finding new depths to love. Elizabeth wandered out next, never wanting to miss anything. Then William, summoned by the sound of his siblings. Judith called it their nightly migration, the way the children ended up on the porch with their parents most evenings. Helena called it perfection. They sat together as a family, 5 people who belonged to each other, watching the last light fade from the sky. Zach told the children stories about the cattle drives of his youth. Helena pointed out constellations. The children asked endless questions, their voices high and sweet in the darkness. Later, much later, after the children had finally been tucked back into bed for good, Helena stood in her studio by lamplight. She had started a new painting, a family portrait. It was technically challenging, capturing multiple subjects in motion, all the complex relationships and emotions. But she was determined to get it right, to create something that showed what this life really meant. Zach appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of tea. Still working, just for a few more minutes. She accepted the tea gratefully. I cannot quite get the light right on this section. He studied the painting over her shoulder. It's beautiful. You can see how much we all love each other. That is what I am trying to capture, not just what we look like, but what we are. And what are we? Helena turned to look at him, this man who had changed her entire life. Happy. We are happy. Zach kissed her forehead. Yes, we are. The years continued to unfold in their steady rhythm. The children grew into teenagers, each developing their own personalities and paths. Daniel, serious and hardworking, took to ranching like he had been born to it, which of course he had been. Elizabeth pursued art with single-minded focus, eventually studying in Omaha and then returning home to open her own studio. William, the adventurer, joined the railroad and sent letters from all over the expanding West. Helena's hair began to show silver threads. Zach's face gained more lines, his hands more scars. But their love, far from fading, deepened and matured like fine wine. They knew each other completely, the good and the bad, the strengths and the weaknesses, and loved each other not despite these things but because of them. Helena's paintings gained national recognition. A gallery in New York exhibited her work. Newspapers wrote articles about the artist who had given up Philadelphia society to document frontier life. People called her a pioneer in Western art. She accepted the praise gracefully, but never forgot that none of it would have been possible without Zach's unwavering support. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party. Half the county attended. There were speeches and toasts and embarrassing stories. Pete, the old cowboy Helena had drawn so many years ago, stood up with tears in his eyes. I've known Zach since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, Pete said. And I've never seen him as happy as he's been these past 20 years with Helena. She brought something special to this place, reminded us that there's beauty in our ordinary lives. So here's to Helena and Zach, to 20 more years and beyond. Everyone raised their glasses. Helena, overwhelmed with emotion, could barely speak. Zach, understanding as always, simply held her hand and let the love in the room wash over them both. When they were old, when their children had children of their own, Zach and Helena still sat on their porch most evenings watching the sunset. Their bodies were slower, their hair completely silver, their hands gnarled with age and work, but their love remained constant. Do you remember the first time I saw you? Zach asked one evening, his voice rougher than it used to be. You were standing by the stockyard fence, drawing like your life depended on it. I remember. You told me I got Pete's crooked nose right. You got everything right, especially choosing me. Helena smiled. You chose me too, you know, we chose each other. Best decision I ever made. Their grandchildren played in the yard, 4 of them now, ranging from age 3 to 10. Daniel's 2 boys, Elizabeth's daughter and William's son, visiting from his home in Colorado. The sound of their laughter carried on the evening breeze. Helena's latest painting stood on an easel nearby. Even at 70, she still painted every day, though her hands were not as steady as they once were. This piece showed the ranch at sunset, golden light spilling over everything, a perfect capture of the beauty she had spent her life trying to document. "That might be your best work yet," Zach said, studying it. "I have been practicing for 50 years. I should be getting better." Helena leaned into his shoulder, fitting against him the way she had for decades. "I have been thinking about my journey west, about that young woman who stepped off the stagecoach with her portfolio and her dreams. And I want to tell her that everything works out better than she could have imagined. That the masterpiece she finds is not something she draws, but someone she loves. That choosing her heart over her plans is the bravest, smartest thing she will ever do." Zach kissed the top of her head. "She would be glad to hear it, as glad as I am that you made that choice." The sunset blazed on, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber and rose. The children played. The cattle settled for the night. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying stories of love and life and all the choices that make us who we are. Helena Zimmerman Iverson, artist and wife and mother and grandmother, sat with the love of her life and watched the day fade into night. She had traveled west seeking inspiration and had found everything she never knew she needed. Her art hung in galleries across the nation. Her children and grandchildren carried on the legacy she and Zach had built. Her life had been full of purpose and passion and profound love. As the first stars appeared, Helena thought about that moment so many years ago when she had looked at Zach and really known, that he was something extraordinary. She had told him he was the masterpiece she had been seeking, and 50 years later, that remained true. Every day with him had been a gift, every year together a privilege. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," Zach replied, his voice warm with all the decades of their shared life. "Always have, always will." The prairie night settled around them, vast and beautiful and eternal. And in their corner of that enormous land, two people who had found each other against all odds sat together in perfect contentment. Their love story written not just in the paintings Helena had created, but in every moment of the life they had built together. A life that started when an artist traveled west and met a cowboy, and discovered that the greatest masterpiece was not made with paint and canvas, but with love and commitment, and the daily choice to build a life together. Their story had a perfect ending because their ending was really about the life they lived, the love they shared, and the family they created. It was a story of the Wild West, of art and cattle drives, of taking chances and following hearts. And it was, in every way that mattered, a story of happily ever after.